Hi, I'm Gwen Foster. I want to talk about an exciting thing today, and that is colon cleansing. Most people do not want to talk about colon cleansing, but I want to tell you that it's one of the most important things that you can do for your health, and it's something that I recommend that you do once or twice a year. Colon is the foundation of health. It is the originator of health. It is everything that you can think of can go wrong can be related to your colon and your small intestine. So I want to talk about some misconceptions of the small intestines and the colon, and let's start with colonoscopies and colon therapy. Can't think of what that's called right now. Colonics. So I don't have anything against colonics. I actually think it's a good idea. But the problem is that people think that when they do colonics that they're taking care of the entire colon system, and they are not. They're irrigating about 2.5 feet or 2 feet of the colon. And your colon system is actually about 25 feet. It's 22 feet approximately of small intestines that goes into 2.5 feet of the large intestine, also known as the colon. And then the food and poop comes out, that's left over from the absorption and the whole process. The same is true of a colonoscopy. When they go in and scope you and they say, we're going to check your intestinal health and make sure you don't have colon cancer, it's kind of misleading because they're also looking at about 2 feet of your colon. Nothing is looking at the 22 feet of small intestines, and it's kind of, you look it up online and look at an illustration, it's a squiggly mess, and there's no way they can scope that. So if you get scoped from the top and you go down, they're looking at the stomach. If they scope you going up, they're looking at the colon, and there's nothing looking at those 22 feet. So to me, it's like, seems a little crazy to look at 2 feet and feel like there's a clean bill of health when actually that may not be the case. So I think it's misleading. One of the, I guess the best person to look into colon health is Bernard Jensen. He has several books. One of them is a book I had to read when I went back to school, and it's called The Guide to Better Bowel Care. And he has some very interesting pictures in the book that I think are enlightening. But one thing that Bernard Jensen said was that the colon is the foundation of health. Like, every single thing that can go wrong with you could be the colon. And he didn't actually know himself why that was until later in his career. And he took a continuing education class that was embryology. And it was in embryology he found the answer, because when we're a little baby being formed, the very first thing we are is the feeding gut tube. And that feeding gut tube membrane stays intact around the entire body. It's our skin, it's our bones, it's our hair, it's everything. If you have a sick colon or intestines, it can literally make any part of you sick. And he knew this because he would do surgeries, and people would wake up from the anesthesia and they maybe had been paralyzed before. They didn't have paralysis. Like, literally, the paralysis was gone. They had eczema before, the eczema was gone. They had mood disorders, the mood disorders were gone. And he didn't know why. He knew the colon was important, but he didn't know why you took out a foot of sick intestines, like in a colitis case, and then the person had other things just disappear. So anyway, his book is excellent, A Guide to Better Bowel Care. And a lot of times, whether it's chronic constipation, chronic or alternating constipation and diarrhea, those are very bad. People should have 1 to 3 bowel movements a day. Probably 2 or 3 is better than 1. But when people have even 1 bowel movement a day, they can still be officially constipated. The colon should be the width of your thumb, and the small intestine should be the width of your pinky. And if poop is coming out that's bigger than your thumb, that's a sign of constipation, because that's not natural. It's a buildup, and then because of force and gravity, it's coming out, and that can be a problem. I've heard of some people in autopsies that had colons a foot wide. That is major impaction. And he talks about, when people do colon cleanse, that this material can come out that is almost like the texture of a tire. Like when you see a shredded tire on the side of the freeway, like the plaque and buildup over many years can come out looking like tire shreds. And this is like old, nasty stuff that is building up. So if you think of your colon should be as thick as your thumb, and it's a foot thick. Think about how much plaque and buildup would have been in that colon. That is disgusting. Also, if you have that tire-like material in your colon or intestines, there's no way that what you're doing that's good nutritionally can absorb. Because if you have a coating on your intestines like a tire, there's no way that the minerals and stuff can get into that, so you'd have a lot of deficiency symptoms even if you're eating well. The two products I recommend are for colon cleansing. I recommend you do this once or twice a year minimum. If you've never done a colon cleanse in your life and you're 30, 40, 50 years old, you probably should do it every few months until things seem normal. My favorite is Oxy-Powder, only because it's easy. It's something that you can just take 4 capsules before bed. It kind of has a bubbling action that bubbles the plaque out so it can just go away. It's super easy, and as far as 95% of my clients love it, and they can't live without it. The one I personally think is good and maybe more effective is Dr. Christopher's 2-part colon cleanse. This one's the one that is more likely to have the shreds of the plaque come out and the hard substances that really adhere to the colon walls. It's like a black charcoal type powder and pills that you do together. What people don't like about it is the black powder. You know, people just don't like anything that is weird, or it doesn't really have a taste. It's more of a texture thing, but it is super effective. And I think if someone wants to get well, they can get through this cleanse, and it's neither one are expensive. It's just a process to go through. The Oxy-Powder is 120 capsules. It actually would be enough to do a colon cleanse like for an entire family. So that's one benefit to Oxy-Powder. With this cleanse, this is like a one-person thing. So it has the black charcoal powder, which is to absorb the toxins in your gut. There's been people that I know, and this is that I know personally, that have had Barbie shoes come out. They've had jacks, like in playing jacks. They've had like big gunks of what I would think is gum, like people swallow gum when they're kids, and lots of gum, and guess what, that sticks to the intestinal walls, and it builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, and so you have this big gooey mess in there. So I hope I've said enough to convince you to do a colon cleanse, because I think it's super important. I'll tell the story even though I'm not encouraging it. I have had people send me pictures of their toilet from colon cleanses. Sometimes it's the first thing I wake up to in the morning, which is probably not, I'm not telling you this so you do this, but I'm telling you I've seen some very interesting pictures of things. Some of them I wish I had not seen, but super interesting, like super interesting what actually happens to people when they do a colon cleanse. So I'll just say that you should do one just to see what shows up in your toilet. All right, thanks, like and subscribe.